The Special Rapporteur welcomes the efforts made by various ministries, law enforcement bodies, information and communications technology companies, and non-governmental organizations in conducting education programs at schools on the risk associated with new technologies. Efforts should also include training for parents and teachers on educating and on involving children in the safe use of the internet. The Special Rapporteur took note that the child-friendly material such as leaflets, booklets, comics, and flyers produced by information and communications technology companies to raise awareness on these issues. The Special Rapporteur also commended the preventive efforts on non-governmental organizations that were specifically aimed at combating the sexual exploitation of children. Colabo organizes talks at high schools and on identifying the tactics used by traffickers and procurers to lure girls into the sex industry. It also conducts nocturnal city walking tours to entertainment areas where they explain how to identify recruiters. The Lighthouse Center for Human Trafficking Victims has produced a magna booklet, Blue Heart, that is aimed at raising the awareness of children and adolescents of the risk associated with sexual exploitation, including the JK business and revenge porn, child prostitution, child pornography, and trafficking children for sexual purposes. Stop Japan Together with Cause Vision and Not for Sale. Japan also has produced a comic book, The Sun Also Rises, to raise awareness on the risk of child sexual exploitation. The Special Rapporteur noted with concern the insufficient involvement of media, advertising companies, and prevention efforts, and urged the government to engage in them actively in prevention campaigns. The media should adopt code of conduct compliant with children's rights and combat the sexual commodification of children and gender stereotyping. The Special Rapporteur noted with concern the lack of involvement of children in the design and development of public policies affecting them. The positive experience of including youth representatives witnessed at the Second World Congress Against Commercial Sexual Exploitation on Children in Yokohama in 2001 shows that the government can do more at the national and local levels to increase the participation of children in the design and implementation of policies to combat their sexual exploitation. In order to increase the participation of children in public life, the government should partner with non-governmental child rights and protection organizations with experience in involving children in their projects. The Special Rapporteur met with representatives of the Office of the Ombudsperson of Children's Rights in Kawanishi City, the first of its kind in Japan. The office was established in 1998 by ordinance of the city government as an organ attached to the mayor who appoints the ombudsperson. The office is mandated to address violations of the rights of the child through advocacy, mediation, and prevention. It provides counseling and mediation services, investigates complaints, conducts awareness-raising campaigns, and makes recommendations to the city government to improve the protection of child rights. The Office of the Ombudsperson operates a helpline and holds consultations with outside its premises. Most of the consultations with children relate to their problems with family or friends, bullying or verbal abuse, or threats from teachers. Even though few complaints relate to child sexual abuse or exploitation, representatives of the Ombudsperson conceded that their role and work methods were not adequate to take on the phenomenon. The Special Rapporteur commended the work of the Ombudsperson for Children's Rights of Kawanishi City and the other child rights monitoring and counseling organizations located at the prefecture of capital levels, totaling 26. She encouraged them to improve coordination in conducting awareness-raising campaigns to prevent child sexual abuse and exploitation, and in sharing information on successful initiatives that contribute to the protection of children from the scourge. The Special Rapporteur noted, however, that children's ombudsperson on the local level cannot play the role of national ombudsperson for children's rights at a national human rights institution. Consequently, she urged the government to prioritize the adoption of the Bill on Human Rights Protection and to establish a national human rights institution in charge of monitoring and advocating for the protection of human rights, including children's rights. Such a body would monitor inter alia compliance of national legislation and policies with international child rights norms, standards, including the right of children to be heard to participate in public issues affecting them. corporate social responsibility, and transnational cooperation. The Special Rapporteur commended the prevention and protection measures adopted since 2011 by the information and communication technology industry to combat the sexual abuse and exploitation of children online. The travel and tourism sector has also implemented voluntary measures to combat child sex tourism by Japanese nationals abroad, such as the Code of Conduct for the Protection of Children from Sexual Exploitation in Travel and Tourism. The Special Rapporteur encouraged the government actively to involve other stakeholders in the business sector, such as the media, advertising companies, and entertainment industry, and manga and anime publishers, in combating the sexual exploitation of children through the adoption of codes of conduct in order to adhere to international child rights standards. They should also be engaged in partnership with the government and non-government organizations in awareness-raising campaigns and prevention programs to protect children from violence, abuse, and exploitation. Japan is actively involved in regional and transnational initiatives to combat the sexual exploitation of children. It hosts the Second World Congress Against Commercial Sexual Exploitation of Children, held in Yokohama in 2001, and participated in the Third World Congress held in Rio de Janeiro in 2008, where participants pledged to establish robust frameworks for the protection of children and adolescents from all forms of sexual exploitation. Most recently, Japan participated in the Third Asian Forum on the Rights of the Child held in Ulaanbaatar in 2014. In the outcome declaration on the forum, participants called for inter alia and acceleration on the development of an implementation of policies, legislation, awareness-raising activities, and other measures for the prevention and prohibition of all forms of violence against children, including child abuse. The National Police Agency organizes an annual conference for investigators on the commercial sexual exploitation of children in Southeast Asia, where representatives of law enforcement agencies from the region exchange information on efforts to protect children from sexual exploitation. As an active contributor to the Bali process on people smuggling, trafficking in persons, and related transnational crimes, Japan took part in the 5th Regional Ministerial Conference on People Smuggling, Trafficking in Persons, and Related Transnational Crimes, held in Bali on April 2, 2013. Participating states pledged to refine regional strategies to address new challenges posed by trafficking in persons. As a member of the Group of the Eight, Japan provides funding of the International Child Sexual Exploitation Database. It also has been active in the framework of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation and the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, including in relation to initiatives to address the sexual exploitation of children online and to foster safer internet environments. Japan also has entered into extradition and mutual legal assistance agreements in criminal matters with other states. Between 2010 and 2014, law enforcement agencies, on the basis of the principle of extraterritorial jurisdiction, referred for cases for prosecution in relation to child sexual exploitation charges. The National Police Agency strives to arrest nationals who commit child sexual exploitation offenses abroad, although they face difficulties in collecting evidence, identifying the victims, and gaining access to victims abroad. The agency also cooperates with the International Criminal Police Organization through its own dedicated focal point, sharing information for the International Child Sexual Exploitation Database and submitting requests for judicial assistance. Conclusion and recommendations. Japan has made considerable progress in combating the sale of children and related trafficking, child prostitution, and child pornography since it hosted the Second World Congress Against Commercial Sexual Exploitation of Children in Yokohama in 2001. It has adopted legislative amendments and policy measures aimed at tackling the scourge of sexual exploitation of children. In particular, it has acquired significant knowledge and the expertise in combating the sexual exploitation of children online through the initiatives of the information and communications technology sector, which constitute good practice to be replicated in other countries. One-stop crisis centers that offer integrated immediate assistance and support for women and girl victims of sexual crimes, including sexual abuse and exploitation, are also good practice that should be extended throughout the country. The sexual exploitation of children, online and offline, is, however, still a major issue of concern in Japan. New technologies have increased the proliferation of child abuse material online, and stepping up efforts to combat it have resulted in a shift of focus from other forms of sexual exploitation, such as prostitution of girls. The sexual commodification of children and gender stereotyping later inter alia have triggered activities and trends that facilitate or lead to the sexual exploitation of children. Moreover, these activities are socially tolerated and usually go unpunished. Japan must build on the momentum created by the reform in 2014 on the Act on the Regulation and Punishment of Acts Relating to Child Prostitution and Child Pornography, and the protection of children to step up efforts to combat all forms of child sexual exploitation and gender inequality. The reform was an important first step toward the eradication of child sexual exploitation, but will be ineffective unless it is strengthened and accomplished by comprehensive measures. Looking ahead, the Olympic Games to be hosted in Tokyo offer a unique opportunity for Japan to take the lead in combating and eradicating the sexual exploitation of children. Recommendations. In order for Japan to consolidate its achievements, overcome the remaining challenges, and ensure the effective protection of children from the scourge of sexual exploitation, the Special Rapporteur recommends that the governments of Japan A. Strengthen and develop a comprehensive strategy against the sexual exploitation of children, including the appointment of an entity in charge of its design, coordination and follow-up, and ensure complementary with other existing plans and policies. B. Allocate the resources necessary for the effective implementation of the above-mentioned strategy and ensure the participation of children and youth in its design, implementations, and evaluations as part of the strategy. It should establish clear and comprehensive legal frameworks to prevent, prohibit, and protect children from all forms of cell and sexual exploitation, and in particular increase the age of consent for marriage for girls to 18 years of age, and the age of sexual consent of children, and expand the definition of child sexual abuse. Criminalize the production, distribution, dissemination, offering, selling, accessing, viewing, and possession of virtual images and representations of children or persons predominantly depicted as children, engaging in explicit sexual activities, or any representation of the sexual parts of a child for primarily sexual purposes. Criminalize the online viewing and accessing of child abuse material. Ban commercial activities that facilitate or lead to the sexual exploitation of children, such as JK services and child erotica. Adopt a bill on human rights protection that inter alia establishes a national human rights institution and an independent children's rights advocate. Ratify the United Nations Conventions Against Transnational Organized Crime on the protocol thereto to prevent, suppress, and punish trafficking in persons, especially women and children, supplementing the United Nations Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime and the optional protocol to the Convention on the Rights of the Child on a communications procedure. Conduct comprehensive empiric research with reliable, up-to-date data on the root causes, push and pull factors, scope, forms, and impact of commercial activities involving children that lead to their sexual exploitation, as well as research on the impact of virtual child abuse material, in order to inform effective prevention and protection measures to eradicate the sexual exploitation of children. Increase the establishment of child-friendly reporting, complaint, and referral mechanisms for child victims of sexual abuse and exploitation, supported by staff trained on the rights of the child and the specific needs of the child's victims. Increase efforts to investigate, prosecute, and sanction offenders related to an online and offline sexual exploitation of children, including prostitution and pornography, to ensure the accountability of perpetrators and redress for children's victims, and in particular, increase training and awareness raising activities of law enforcement agencies on the identification of offenses related to the sexual exploitation of children, and on the detection and treatment of child victims, incorporating a child rights perspective. Take measures to ensure child-friendly justice proceedings and the protection of child victims and witnesses before, during, and after trials. Ensure the effective application and implication of sanctions established by the Criminal Code for offenses relating to sexual exploitation of children. namely avoiding the suspension of sentences as an essential means to combat impunity for the said crimes. Establish comprehensive right-based and child-centered care, recovery, and reintegration programs for child victims of sexual abuse and exploitation, and in particular, increase the number of fund and support one-stop crisis centers to provide high-quality integrated care and assistance, also focused on child victims of sexual abuse and exploitation.